TopMedTalk. Well, hello. Welcome to TopMedTalk Down Under. I'm Andy Cumpstey, and I'm here again with my co-host Kate Leslie at the Australian and New Zealand College of Anaesthetists and Faculty of Pain Medicine's annual scientific meeting in Brisbane. And we're at our booth at the busy healthcare industry exhibition after another really fantastic morning at this excellent conference.
It's been great. There's so many different things going on, and we're really focusing today on the emerging research leaders, and we've got emerging leaders altogether. Tomorrow we've got a Women in Leadership breakfast, so that's really good, and there might be even some men in leadership activities around as well.
And you've got a talk on gender equality and balance coming up in that tomorrow.
I am. I'm talking about gender equity in research, and I'll be focusing on getting more women involved in research and involved in publishing. I think it's going to be really good, tomorrow's session. So fortunately, we've got some people who are involved with that here today.
Hi, I'm Claire Maxwell. I'm a staff specialist anaesthetist here in Brisbane at the Mater Hospital, and I was involved in the organisation and convening of the Emerging Leaders Conference this year.
Terrific. Shannon?
So I'm Shannon Morrison. I'm a Pediatric anaesthetist at Queensland Children's Hospital here in Brisbane, and I was the other co-convener of the Emerging Leaders Conference for 2024.
And finally, Mark.
Yeah, hi. My name's Mark Priestley. I'm the head of the Anaesthetic department at Westmead Hospital in Sydney, and I'm also the chair of the Leadership and Management Special Interest Group for the College of Anaesthetists and the ASA and the NZSA.
Fantastic. So can you tell us a bit about the Special Interest Group's work?
Yeah, sure. So I think the purpose of that special interest group is trying to help assist fellows with education, resources and networking in leadership and management skills. It's something that I think a lot of people just assume that doctors would know something about, and specialists maybe a little more. And then when we get out there, we find actually that there's no training, and people find themselves learning on the job, and perhaps there's a better way of doing that.
And so did you learn on the job? Tell us about your leadership journey.
I absolutely did learn on the job, and in fact it was only after I became a head of department that I started partaking in a few extra activities, the company directors course, the affiliated course for the College of Medical Administrators, and I just think, why the hell didn't I do those a lot earlier?
It sounds like life in general, Mark.
It is, but you only get one shot, don't you?
That's right.
Yes, but pass it on to other people is all I can do.
And so you assumed the leadership of your department relatively recently.
Yeah.
What sort of experience did you bring to that, and what was your vision for, what was a well-led department before going to even better things?
Yeah, look, that's absolutely true. It was a well-led department. I was very happy there. I was the supervisor of training for 19 years. And then I took 6 months of long service leave, and it was a bit of a turning point for me to decide what to do. I thought it was time to move on from the supervisor of training role. And while I was away, the predecessor who'd been there that entire time announced his retirement. And it gave me several months just to have a bit of think about who might take over and how I could support them. And then people started shoulder tapping and saying, have you thought about it? And it gave me a couple of months to think about it. And I think what attracted me most was not taking over what was a good product. It was trying to visualise the potential of the place. And in actual fact, it could be so much more, and I would love to be able to see it move on and do better things. And I still think that. I'm still working on it. But that was the motive.
One of the great things about the Westmead Hospital is its location in the western suburbs of Sydney. So for our international leaders, that's out in the suburbs, a less advantaged part of Sydney, a lot of recent immigrants, and quite close to where the Olympic Games actually were held in Sydney.
Correct.
And also close to a new university, the University of Western Sydney, which is really focused on first-in-family students and Indigenous students. And you've developed some relationships with them as well as the Sandstone universities.
Yeah, we had. One of the things I wanted to improve when I arrived was, I guess, our research credentials and research skill set within the department. And the tradition up until that point was to try and grow people internally, which was very noble, and we had some very hardworking people do quite well. But that takes a long time, and without mentorship and coaching from within, it was just seeming like it was going to take a lot longer to get anywhere. And so one of my tasks was to go looking for people to come in as an academic head of service. And ultimately, we found that person. Professor Stefan Dielman is now working in our department. But most importantly, we worked with the University of Western Sydney, who was not the sandstone choice. And they were extremely cooperative and helpful in supporting us in making that appointment. So, yeah, we're very lucky to have that relationship.
Yeah, we were discussing in the trials group about the most pivotal person in growing a new research department, and it's actually the director of anaesthesia. So even if they're not a research enthusiast, hands-on, we need money and we need the support in theatre to get those research projects done.
Yeah, I feel like the most important role I have as a head of department, and the main reason I went into it, was to be an enabler. And that's why having relationships with emerging leaders and with the research academics, etc., I feel like the best I can do is pave the way for other good people.
So before we turn to our emerging leaders, if you had your time again, what would you do differently? Or to frame that in another way, what advice have you got for our emerging leaders here on the podcast or who are listening?
I grew up, I think, thinking that the leadership of any hospital and even department at a department level was another planet for other people. It was an us and them approach, and that really their goals were separate to ours. And it's only much later and with more experience I realised that actually the goals and objectives of good managers at the hospital level should be identical to those of good clinicians. And so really, actually, they're not foreign people, they're not aliens. They're people like you and me, and actually we should be aspiring to be able to make change by being part of that process. I wish I'd known that earlier.
That all sounds fantastic, Mark. I think that's a really good point just to pivot to Claire and Shannon. And I'm really keen to pick on this Emerging Leaders Conference.
Yes.
So I'm calling it the right?
Correct, yep.
So for people, we've chatted about this a little bit already at the conference, haven't we, over dinner and things last couple of days. But for people out there that haven't heard of this really fantastic event before, why don't you just give us a summary of what it is, what it involves, and who comes to it?
Well, we're very lucky. It's sponsored by ANZCA, and we end up with 31 delegates this year in a retreat-based conference. So for 3 days, in the bush, right people, right place, an opportunity to meet with other emerging leaders around both Australia and New Zealand, as well as we had delegates from Singapore, Hong Kong, Papua New Guinea, and Malaysia, UK and Ireland.
It's an incredible mix of people.
Yeah, so it was pretty lucky. And we talk about the issues affecting us as new fellows, some of the challenges we see in our future as leaders in the healthcare profession. And we have the opportunity to invite really inspirational speakers to come and guide us, give us that information that you have, Mark, help you share. So hopefully it doesn't take us as long to work out.
Hopefully not.
And what was your role in this event, Shannon?
So we were the conveners of the event this year, which meant we had the great privilege of being able to attend last year to watch their program and learn from them how they set it up. ANZCA and the events team were fantastic. So they managed the majority of the logistics of, organising accommodation and making sure that the facilities are appropriate and whatnot. So our role was more about selecting speakers that fit with our overall theme. So the theme for our conference was breaking barriers, and that was decided quite early in the process, about 18 months ago, and then selecting speakers that fit with the overall topics that we wanted to cover that we thought were relevant to new fellows. So the delegates are within the first 5 years of obtaining their FAN score or FPN.
Okay.
So it's an incredible group of people that come from a really diverse background, and we wanted to reflect that in our program.
And those delegates, so they're all within their first 5 years?
Correct.
And is that so anyone can apply for this? So you have to be selected, or how does that work?
Yeah, both. So an invitation goes out to all fellows when the application's open, and there is a selection process. So they submit a CV and they answer some questions. There's a scoring process, and it goes to each of the states and New Zealand's regional committees to put forward their delegates. The number of delegates for each state is mostly population-based, so you'll have more delegates from more highly densely populated areas. And then there are other delegates selected from different approaches as well. So there is someone from the Indigenous Health Committee and from our overseas sister colleges.
And these delegates go on to some pretty impressive things, don't they? So I believe, Mark, you're a former alumni of this event, and then Kate is as well.
I'm too old. So the ELC started. Sort of long after I was 5 years out. I would love to have gone. I would have applied.
Right.
But it's something that I'd have to go back into the annals now to see how long it's been going.
It's 2007.
There you go.
Yes. Correct. But in its current name, since 2018. So it previously had a different name, which is what Kate attended it as, which was the New Fellows Conference, and then it's had some rebranding since then.
Right, I see. And so in terms of the speakers that you bring to this event, then, do they have to go through the same rigorous selection criteria? I mean, how does that work?
To be honest, we had a wish list of people that we really wanted to hear from, and then we stacked our program with them, and we asked them, and every single one of them said yes. So
they did.
We were thrilled. So we ended up just having a program of people who, once we described to them what the conference was and what its purpose was and what the delegates were like, there was just unrelenting enthusiasm to be part of it. So we're very grateful to all of our speakers.
Claire, can you give us an example or some examples of what these speakers were talking to you about, some of the topics they were discussing, maybe?
Oh, well, I can tell you my highlight of the conference. We arranged a panel, a Breaking Barriers panel. So we were really fortunate to have Dinesh Kalapana come and speak to us, who's previous Queenslander of the Year, who's a huge advocate for medical professionals working with a disability. We also able to get Bridget Effney involved, who's involved in ANZCA Council, representing a Gender Equity Subcommittee, as well as some of our colleagues. We're two of our Indigenous First Nations colleagues, and another colleague, Ed Pillings, talking about his experience with chronic disease and working in anaesthesia. And with this panel, open it to the floor of enthusiastic delegates just to ask questions about working with these people in theatres or as their director, how to best support them to reach their best potential, us in the future. Yeah.
It was very moving and a huge privilege for us to hear Dr. Jean Slockey and Dr. Dash Newington, who are our two First Nations anaesthetists, and soon to be, for Jean's sake, and currently for Dash, Spanskas of the college, talking about their emotional responses to particular events in the last 12 months of Australian politics. I felt very privileged to hear their honesty in their responses. I think it was a really well-received panel.
And Mark, even just chatting to Claire and Shannon, I can pick up the benefits from this fantastic programme, but I think it's fantastic that ANZCA's seeing the benefits of this and putting the investment in. But I mean, from a national point of view, are you seeing that from your side of people coming through?
Well, look, what's fantastic, and certainly I see it in New South Wales, is the number of people applying to be an attendee at the ELC is going up. It's actually a very competitive process, and that's fantastic. I think what I would like to see now moving forward is where to from there.
Yes.
So, we have this gap here now where there's training, there's the Emerging Leaders Conference within the first 5 years, but then what? And now we've got a little bit of a gap that potentially we could fill, and I think it's a combination of the view and the lens from moving into that. So we'd love to work with people within and alumni of the Emerging Leaders and with leaders themselves, established heads of department and other leaders in ANZCA to say, okay, how do we continue that education and process of forming the next leaders in anaesthesia and in healthcare?
That's a really great point, isn't it? And I mean, so in the United Kingdom, we definitely don't have, as far as I'm aware of, any similar program like this, which is a real shame. How do people go from here to get that next step? I mean, is it mentorship? Is it apprenticeship type work? Is it a mixture of both?
I think one of the benefits that you underestimate is what it's like to be on a retreat for 3 days with these big wigs from the college who are just a name on a newsletter, and suddenly you're having dinner with Chris Kokis and you're sitting next to Kieran chatting about the weather.
That networking.
The fact that you're comfortable to call them Kieran and Chris after 3 days, it really demystifies ANZCA as an organisation and makes it seem like you can take ownership and be involved. I think that was one of the unintended benefits of it.
I think that's probably a very intentional benefit from our point of view.
Unexpected benefits maybe, but something that it gives them a concept on the inner workings of the college. We had a You Can't Ask That panel where we got the delegates to pre-submit questions over the coming weeks, and we told them you can be as controversial as you want, knowing that there may be a little bit of rephrasing if it's a little bit too spicy. but that they were encouraged to anonymously submit questions on whatever topic they wanted. And I think that was also an excellent panel.
Go on, I've got to ask, what were the most controversial questions?
It's always the usual stuff. So geopolitical questions. Why are our fees so high? Where does the money go? You know, all the ones that you think about as a trainee where you're like, why did I pay this much for my exam? How do we get more First Nations doctors or even First Nations people to do medicine in the first place rather than just focusing on into anaesthesia? But where do we start the pipeline?
And how do you support equity and diversity in all realms of the college life?
More sessions on that?
I think it did highlight that that's really the huge focus of the new fellow cohort is, you know, how do we see what we want to be? Because at the moment, sometimes you might not see, females in high-up positions, senior leadership positions, and how do we support, well, in my case, pretty keen to support females getting to the top.
Not just women, but people of colour and people from non-English speaking backgrounds. Like my ideal dream would be in 20 years' time to come to the college ceremony and see a stage party that reflects the Australian population and New Zealand.
But I think that's a really powerful concept, isn't it? And someone, so Kay Mitchell in Southampton, who I worked very closely with for a number of years with the Extreme Everest Project, she's got this amazing phrase of you can't be what you can't see. And we sort of undervalue that, underappreciate it. But I think being at this sort of event, which is, I guess, relatively informal from what you're describing it as.
Yeah, and that's the idea.
And it breaks those barriers down, but also gives you these sort of fantastic role models. So I guess that leads on to what next?
Probably asleep.
I mean, one of the things that I would love to see us start to look at is a more formalised process of senior consultant to junior consultant mentorship.
Yes.
You know, we now have this gap between people who are in established leadership roles and people 5 to 10 years out saying what's next. And I think the way forward, as you said earlier, about some sort of mentorship program, you know, for the first time, into my knowledge, we're going to have a networking and education day for heads of department, and it's in September as a satellite to the Leadership SIG conference, and we've been overwhelmed with interest, and these are people who are either heads of department or deputy heads of department, just desperate to get in touch with each other and discuss topics of common interest, common challenges, and particularly our rural heads of department. There are people from all over rural Australia and New Zealand who obviously have fewer connections than they'd like. But if we could formalise mentorship right from the get-go, then hopefully these people would be moving along that conveyor belt all the way through their early career.
Fantastic. So Shannon, what's next in leadership in your own life?
Someone at the conference gave an excellent summary of leadership, and he said that the most important things were likability and capability, but part of that is also undermined by work ethic, luck, and just timing. So I think I'm going to have a little break and rely on luck for a while and timing. Otherwise, maybe after I've recovered from this conference, think about where to after that.
Well, they say fortune favours the brave. So good idea to rely on a bit of luck. And it is really hard work organising a conference. Really hard work.
I would encourage anyone who's asked, though, to do ELC, say yes, it's phenomenal.
Yes. And what about you, Claire?
Oh, yes, that's just a follow-up from Shannon, really, that, being asked, it was a huge privilege. It was a fantastic opportunity, and I'm very grateful that someone asked me, tapped on the shoulder, said, I think you'd be good at this, please consider it. And so I think my aim for the next little while is to do that for other people, that we're in the privileged position, that we know how things work, know what's involved, but just support early career leaders, my colleagues, the trainees coming through to, put your hand up, have a go, be engaged, make change for the future.
Well, you're talking about sponsorship there. The mentorship is that personal thing, and the coaching thing is sort of in that space. But sponsorship is where you're talking to the president of the college saying, Shannon Morrison would make a really great counsellor of college, or Claire Maxwell would be really good as the next sort of dean of the Faculty of Pain Medicine or whatever. And to just get names of people, but in particular women and people from other minoritized groups, bring them to the attention of the people in charge. like Mark.
Absolutely. And I think, that my message to people at my level, and it's not whether you're in formal or, authoritative leadership positions or not, it's about listening. So we think we know because we were there, but actually we don't know. And we don't know what we don't know until we listen to the people who are living their early career and say, okay, what is it? How can we help? And then we work together to see what the next step is for them.
Because I think the people in their early career are having a different experience to us.
Correct.
They've lived through the pandemic in particular at a pivotal. Well, it was pivotal for everybody, but for people moving through the exams and the crucial phase of moving into consultant roles, it was very tough. And I don't think, and there are other things like their facility with social media, not like us troglodytes.
Absolutely. Yes, I was trying to promote a particular position on another committee that I was trying to get on, and I tried to get onto Facebook, and everyone under 30 just started laughing at it.
Have you gone on TikTok yet?
Reddit, TikTok. Okay, but I'm not a native speaker, so I need help. Yeah.
Well, you tell us all. We'll follow you and retweet everything you say. And Andy, you're in the sort of, you've gone through the early mid part of your leadership journey, but I guess TopMedTalk is really part of your, climb to the top of the social media Everest, and you're doing a great job. So I think now we better bring this interview to an end. I'd like to thank our speakers. Have been fantastic. You can hear our interview on the daily newsletter for the conference, also on the TopMedTalk website and app. And you can follow us on Twitter, now known as X, and Facebook. So join the conversation.
TopMedTalk. Thanks for downloading TopMedTalk. Don't forget to subscribe. Check us out on YouTube and, of course, on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and X. Also, it's important to remember that TopMedTalk is the broadcasting arm of EPPOM, evidence-based perioperative medicine. We'd love you to find out more about that, and the way to do that is eppom.org. Check out our website and find out about some of the incredible conferences we're going to be arranging across the year. eppom.org.